Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. In this video is to bring you a closer look at the Bommer number LB4384-400-639 single acting spring hinge, full mortise, residential weight, lube bearing, steel base, satin bronze finish. So let's go over this part number. LB stands for lube bearing. It's a maintenance-free bearing construction by Bommer, proprietary sort of bearing construction. The 4384 is a representation of the hinge, a combination of the 1/4 inch radius corners, the template pad or the whole pattern of the screws, the fact that it is made for Taylor brand doors and frames. Okay, the 400 is a reference to the size, and that means that it's 4 inches tall, and the height is the first dimension on a hinge like this, and 4 inches wide. The 639 means two things. It means it's satin bronze plated on steel. Okay, so it's a full mortise hinge. You can see from the swag on the hinge leaves here that when the leaves are brought parallel, they're intended to be mortised flush to the edge of the door and frame. Okay, very typical installation for that. Speaking of the screw holes, you're going to get screws in a complementary finish. Okay. Let's see here now. There is a link below this video to the template, which shows everything important dimensionally about it. The only thing we haven't mentioned is the leaf thickness. It's 96 thousandths of an inch thick, which is typical for residential applications. Also, you can compare your needs against the location of the screw holes as they are given there on the Bommer template as well. There is a description below this video, and the extended description of how many spring hinges you need given the size of the door. Let's talk about that now. So Bommer says if you've got up to 85-pound doors, 2 spring hinges are required, and 110-pound doors, you'd be looking at 3 spring hinges. Now, and you can mix and match this. A standard 4x4 spring hinge is going to be compatible with the axis of pivoting on this hinge. I'm a fan of more spring hinges than what they call out, not for the obvious reason that the hinges are relatively inexpensive. However, you will experience a significantly greater amount of success with spring hinges when you've got ample spring power on reserve to do the job. Hinges like this are going to be used in residential applications. You'll have exterior doors that you just want the door to close behind you. Or you could also have, I suppose, a attached garage door that's fire rated. And a fire rated door needs to be both self-closing, which this does, and self-latching. And it's a self-latching part that you'll have a problem with if you don't have ample spring power to do the job, meaning if you don't have enough spring hinges. So also, you could have a situation where it's a condo building, and you've got the front door opening in the summer, and you got everyone has their windows open, and the air comes rushing through, so you'll modify the spring tension. Then when that condition changes in the winter, you've got a modification of the spring tension, and you've got to set that quite drastically when you don't have enough springs also on the door. And I have found that you can weather the changes of season better when you've got all 3 spring hinges, or 2 when you ought to have maybe just 1 as well. The logic is this: when you're setting the spring tension, and we'll go over that in a moment, if you only have 1 spring or 2 spring hinges and you needed 2 or 3, you've got to set that tension so high just to get the door moving through its closing cycle fast enough so it builds up inertia to ride out the fact that there's very little stored energy left at the closing end, or the latching cycle of the closing cycle of the door. And if it's a fire rated door, you know, the door needs to be latching. It needs to be latched when it's closed. And you obviously would want a door to be compliant with code. It's there for a reason, obviously life safety. So when you consider how many spring hinges to get, consider the use of the door, consider, you know, the conditions in general. And you can always add more. Now I liken spring hinges to a tugboat. They don't go very fast, but they pull a lot of weight at a very slow speed. And when you've got plenty of spring hinges, you can set that tension and share that load amongst many of them, so that at the last 10 degrees, there's still enough energy to get it overcoming all of the air pressure out here and then the friction of the latch as it hits the strike predictably and reliably. Now, setting the tension. With a Bommer spring hinge, you're going to get a tension rod, which is a black piece of steel, and you're going to get a tension pin. This order, and that's the silver pin here. This order happens to have 2 hinges on it, so they've included 2 of everything. Now the tension rod, when you're installing this with the tension collar pointed up, you'll insert that into one of these holes. You insert the tension rod in there. Okay, and once you got it in, you'll turn it clockwise. And as you turn it clockwise, you see that you reveal new additional holes. And it's into one of those holes that you insert the tension pin, and that's how the tension is set. Bommer recommends not to exceed 3 holes. You don't want to damage the spring, break it, it's not repairable. And that's how the tension is set. It's quite frankly that simple. Okay. Available in several different finishes, this LB4384. So if you've got a Taylor brand door and frame, here's your hinge, select your finish, you're all good. If you have any questions on the Bommer LB4384-400-639 spring hinge or any other Bommer product, please feel free to reach out to us. The last thing I'd like to point out is the Bommer logo, and right above it says Made in USA, a fact that Bommer is quite proud of, as am I to represent them. Thank you very much.